anthropomorphise nature, and everyone thinks it's really cool because we live in a world full of ambulances and stuff to take care of us. But if we're thrown out there into the blind force of nature, it's a shock. Suddenly we realise, bang, there's something out there that could really kill me. It's a whole new experience. Before, we were just used to the idea of other human beings trying to kill us. So there's this element in Deleuze.
Yeah, it seems like he recognizes schizophrenia as an important component of intelligence, which is it's not completely original. I think he doesn't have any exposure to Heidegger, but he does have indirectly because he follows Levinas and he follows not Levinas maybe, but Derrida and Sartre. So maybe that's where he got some of his information, or maybe he was diagnosed or something, but or knows somebody that was diagnosed. But that's one of the themes in his philosophy.
Well, my understanding was he had a strong background in psychology. He was a psychologist and kind of like other and then turned to philosophy. But he was first a psychologist.
So what are we going to do, David? Are we just going to skip over Levinas and go over to Deleuze, or what?
I hope not.
Okay.
Come on.
Why don't you start, Terry? What did you think?
For me, thank you, James. For me, the most informative part of the material that David laid out for us was the 60-minute lecture from Matt. Matt, that's his name, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have his full name and bio, but anyway, for me, he positioned or placed Levinas in the philosophical project. And I think his point, Matt's, that Levinas was the first existentialist philosopher that came along that removed the ego from the formula and invited us to engage with the other, and in so doing, we could be informed on ethics. Now, I'm open to the group here. Get me if I got it wrong, but it's my memory and my readings. Heidegger never really, and I think he said it, I'm not concerned with ethics. And we haven't really heard much about ethics from the existential philosophers unless you could read some kind of ethical project into Nietzsche. But with Levinas, he took the concept of ethics and I guess morality quite seriously. And I think that's very appealing and attractive for the first time. And so the readings and the lecture that I've done on Levinas, I find him pretty fascinating. Now, Matt had some criticisms of Levinas, supposedly, potentially racism or whatever, but he didn't mean it like the traditional definition of the word racism. But the idea of the face of the other and the encounter, I find quite fascinating and informative. So that's what worked for me.
Yeah, that's good. Anyone else like the concept of the face?
The concept of the what, please? I'm sorry.
The face. Levinas has the other is represented by infinity and the face. Go ahead, Derek.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think this is. I think Terry is right. It is a part of the philosophical project, and Levinas seems to give us something that the others don't. Okay, Jean-Paul Sartre, he promised to write a work on ethics, but he never did. Also, I'm concerned about the things that Levinas was concerned about. I mean, the notion of being that Sartre and Heidegger had. It's two, well, I think of it as a hypostasis of a consciousness. I think it as a category error, that being, I think, does not exist. It's just an idea, unlike, consciousness that exists. So I think it, but then again, Levinas still seems to be under the spell of Heidegger with this notion of being that he goes back to. But nevertheless, he seems to be moving away with the notion of ethics. Let's go toward, have this idea of otherness, which sets into his general outlook. But here, he seems to, sorry if I'm going on a bit, but he's talking about ethics, and my critique of Levinas, if there is one, is that is similar to the critique that Sartre makes of Heidegger's focus on death. That death is a contingent factor, aspect of our existence. It need not exist in a phenomenological sense. In the same sense, other people need not exist in a phenomenological, this may sound a bit strange to say, but they need not exist in a phenomenological sense. So, and I think the focus on ethics is good. It takes us away from that focus on being, but nevertheless, I think it's good as a clue, as a way forward, but I would really say, well, what is the nature of ethics? It's a study of value. So I would refocus on value, because ethics to me is too particular a study. Okay, that's all I have to say for the moment.
Terry, I wanted to ask you, and maybe also, but Terry, did you read the Humanism document written by?
We talked about that last time. Yeah. Existentialism is a humanism, where he was defending existentialism from criticism that it wasn't humanist.
And that gets into ethics, wouldn't you say? That document?
Well, only slightly and very quickly. I think it was his companion, Simone de Beauvoir, who wrote about the concept of responsibility. Mm-hmm. And in that so doing, she touched on what you might call an ethical responsibility we have to those who facilitate our flourishing. So if I use you as part of my project of flourishing, I incur a certain responsibility toward you, a commitment, whatever. That, from the readings I've done, was about as close as I can recall of a discussion of ethics in between Sartre and if you recall, I'll make this quick. In the last meeting, I read from that piece where Sartre said, well, if you're criticizing existentialism as not a humanism, you're not using the right interpretation or the right ideals of humanism, because if existentialism is a project of going forward and becoming and not just looking inward, and is that not a benefit to the human race? Which I think, it's a question, I think that's where Nietzsche was at. You could say Nietzsche might have humanist characteristics in him because he wanted the individual to go forward. That's which doesn't kill me, makes me better. And that you can make the case that has benefited the human race throughout time.
Yeah, I think Heidegger has a lot of unspoken values. The being in time has kind of like unspoken or hidden values that they pop up in the text here and there when he's discussing what the philosophical value of taking one line, one dialectical line, or another would be, and that's where the values sort of like pop up in the text. But they're there. It's just that they aren't the backbone, and he doesn't allow metaphysical ideas or values to become the backbone of the argument. At least not very often. I'm. Did anyone sort of notice the nomenclature that Levinas is using? He's saying is the self is the same. So when he's talking about the first person in a relationship, it's the same. The ego is this his name for it is la même, the same. And then and then the other, is the other, and the alterity. It's another word for the other. It's the difference. In other words, alterity. But he also says the absolute other, the absolute otherness. So in other words, there's this kind of, and of course the face. So and I think you probably you like that, Terry and Derek. Does anyone have any other kind of like readings of the? Oh, and the other thing that I noticed is infinity comes up, and I read another document by him where he kind of made pretty clear that infinity came up in the recognition of the face, and he does describe that, I think, in the last section of the essay. So he doesn't, I think by infinity, he doesn't mean infinity exactly. In other words, it's not the mathematical infinity. It's not the number line, where infinity of positive numbers is larger than the infinity of prime numbers. He's not talking about that kind of infinity. He's talking about a special kind of infinity that only comes up, I think, in human relations. But anyone else have a different explanation for his dominance, the dominance of the theme of infinity, other than the fact that he gets it from Descartes? He mentions Descartes Meditations, section 3 and 4. Meditations on First Philosophy, sections 3 and 4. Where he has a dialectic, long dialectic about how he can arrive at the concept of God. And of course, Levinas is going around that. He's using the concept of infinity and trying to say that I'm representing the type of infinity that Descartes was talking about, but he's referring to the other. The other is what is actually becoming an infinity for the self, and in the presence of the face, in the presence of a physiognomy of the other. So to me, it's a very careful, it's a carefully but kind of obnoxiously articulated metaphysics of relationship, and he's getting to a point. The point he's getting to is a kind of a moralism. So I'll stop there. Anyone have some comments on this metaphysics of the other?
Yes, I mean, I think I'd quite like to ask a question, because I'm not read enough of Levinas, but it seems to me that his concept of the face seems to be obscure and ambiguous. I'd like to know, I mean, is this a general critique of Levinas? I mean, what is the face? I mean, does it include chimpanzees, fetuses, people who devalue themselves? I mean, it's such an obscure notion. It seems too hard to append a principle to it. I mean, I don't know whether this notion of infinity can be used. I mean, I don't know whether this notion of infinity can be used to help to define face. And is this face? I mean, what about the face of God? Is this a part of the metaphysics perhaps that's lurking on the side there?
I don't know if he's Jewish. I don't know if he believes in the face of God. That they make a lot of big deal about the difference between the Christian God and the Jewish God. And the Jewish God is more pure faith. It's more of a I'm not Jewish, but it is more of a declaration. I believe in God. I have God is a principle, just like a metaphysical principle almost. So that if you're Jewish, you always believe in God. Everything you do can be because of God. He can be referred to as a cause. He can be referred to as infinite, but it's not something that you he can't be described, or even in some cases even named. In other words, they say Gid, or Jehovah, or some kind of like acronyms. You get, and Levinas is able to write it, even though he is a Talmudic scholar. He's able to write it in his essay, but a lot of American Jews won't even write the word God. It's illegal. You have to put a dash for the letter O or something, if it's at least if it's in a magazine. So the idea is that God is untouchable. So that's the difference. There's this different concept of God. Not that for Levinas he doesn't exist. For Levinas, God does exist, but because he's writing philosophy, he's following the tradition of bringing up God once per essay or once per chapter. Like not kind of saturating the philosophy with theism, just hiding it, perhaps. So I don't know if that answers your question, Derek.
I'd like to remark that no, I don't think the face of God idea is helpful for understanding Levinas's idea. His idea of the infinity of the face comes from the fact that if there is an agent behind it, then the face is going to animate in a way that lets you know that there is a time transcending agent behind it. So imagine talking to a mechanical face, like the ones that already exist with the company, I can't remember the name, and then talking to a real face. If you're able to distinguish between a good animatronic face and this infinite consciousness that's like the truest of all substances. The infinity of the infinite here is a temporal one. If the self behind the face passed away and dissolved with all the content of the present moment, which is the sense presence, then it wouldn't have any real existence. In order to really exist for Aristotle is to not only be here in this moment, but to have an internal energy that's like a second derivative. It's like popping past. So it's like there's the force that got the object moving, so it's moving at a certain rate per second. But you can imagine like an accelerative force or something inside of it, like this snap, crackle, and pop. And all these
you're talking about anime. I think Aristotle's term was anime, the spirit. Something has to have a spirit, and it has to have a presence, like you say.
Yeah, there has to be a striving and a telos inside of it in order for it to be a substance. Remember, rocks weren't substances for Aristotle. Plants and animals were substances because they had something in them that was self-surpassing, and it reached past the present moment. It was a purposive, teleological thing. So it's kind of like a higher dimensional, like super density that is actually reaching past the present moment into the future. That's the infinity. So you see this when you see a live face, because there's an expectational sentience, something that we recognize because we do it also. So we know that what's interior to that face isn't atoms whose properties are passing away with the present moment. There's something in them that's like a higher derivative that moves past the present into the future. So that's the infinity. It's the infinity of the will, and will and substance are the same thing here.
Yeah, I agree with you, except for all the references to Aristotle. I think although they're probably helpful, that the idea of infinity doesn't mean what we normally think of as infinity, but it's a way of qualifying the active, the potential and spiritual aspect of the being that we're facing, and so and it's also this idea of the power of the other, of course, leads to this idea at the very end of the essay talks about injustice. So, in other words, we're basically dealing with this is the beginnings of the social justice movement. The idea that the notion of social justice, that we by ignoring the presence of the infinite other, we are laying the groundworks for a war, so that they will present themselves. They present themselves as a careful eye on us, and then as a result of our injustice, they don't have a complete range of alternatives. Since our injustice can mean murder, and he's pretty clear. He's talking about the worst case, right? Murder. So that's basically it can basically implies a war. So there will be a potential war whenever we encounter this infinite other. Hunter, you look excited. Come on, what do you have to say?
Oh man, well, let's see what stood out to me. Well, the infinity to me was more like, yeah, it was an inhabitants of the absolute other, what he calls it, but more so than that, like it's almost non. You're unable to experience the infinity, like, and he uses it almost in a really broad sense of just that which is the others. But as soon as you, it's almost in a Schrodinger's cat kind of way. As soon as you, or in a quantum way, or the experiencer, as soon as you look at it, it's not the infinity anymore. And so it's almost like there's this what's it called, infinite duality, right? This which then you get a Deleuze where he starts to talk about multiplicity, but there's this infinite duality of good and bad, this and the other, murder and non-murder, whatever you want to, whatever what's it called, what he called it,
ambiguity.
Yeah, ambiguity, and he called it an ideatum versus an idea. So it's like the idea is not that which we describe it as. It's separate than the label that we prescribe the idea to. And so as soon as you begin to label an infinity, you undermine the infinity itself. So it's really like disassociative in a way. It's the out of body, right? It's the nonsensical, the non-perceivable, right? And so it's very open-ended, and very, he doesn't ever put his finger on it, but it's always there, right? Right. There's something else.
Well, Levinas brings this up by saying that I'm much more concerned with the idea of infinity than with infinity. So he spends about a whole section talking about the idea of infinity specifically, and that's like you're saying, that's probably the ideatum in Deleuze.
Which is anti-Cartesian, as you said before. It's like infinity to Descartes was a thing, like it was labeled. It's
the extension of God.
Yeah, it's the extension of God, and it's achievable. Yeah. It's a symbol, and therefore as soon it is, right? But to Levinas, it almost isn't, because as soon as you say that it's a being, it's almost non-being. It's almost, you can't, it's non-perceptive, right? Like I said before.
Right.
very,
Levinas,
very interesting.
Levinas is pretty careful, though. He kind of blames being on Heidegger. He
Oh,
says
for sure.
being is bad for all these reasons, and instead there's the le même et l'autre, you know, le même et l'autre, you know. So he has like he has a definite kind of he has issues with philosophy in general, you know, and he has these specific issues with Heidegger. But there's a certain similarity, like I guess Matt was saying, there's a certain similarity to Sartre, but not that close, not really that close. So he's like very interesting. I'm pretty anti, but that's why I'm kind of like everybody else. Fill this in, because I studied this very strictly. I did my usual kind of like deep reading. I'm even writing an essay on it, but it's like not my cup of tea. And I'm hoping that I can get into Deleuze, even though Deleuze is also like Deleuze is not anti-Heidegger, but he didn't study like these other guys, Derrida and Levinas and Sartre. He didn't actually study with Heidegger. So these other guys are the next. Especially Levinas is the beginning of the and Deleuze definitely. Deleuze is the next generation, so that'll be interesting to sort of see the first non-Heideggerian generation of French philosophers.
Yeah, Deleuze is definitely a radical. I mean, it's very interesting getting into his philosophy, which we could. I'll let us finish Levinas first before we get into Deleuze. But yeah, very, very intriguing.
I found a nice little video where Deleuze is giving Hegel a hard time, very heavy criticism, quite amusing. I'll just put that one in.
Yeah, there's a lot of philosophers. That's interesting because I kind of like look for references.
Putting the boot in the Hegel, and we can all look on with satisfaction.
Right. Yeah. No, that's true. I think Levinas touches on that a little bit. I'm not sure if he's the one that brings it up. I think he I'm not sure if in the document if he actually says the names of Fichte and Hegel. They're very close. Fichte and Hegel. They were both kind of like super Kantian philosophers and post-Kantian philosophers, and they're very close in some respects. Hegel was like into dialectics, and he got that from Kant. And Fichte was I haven't read a lot of stuff by Fichte. I know he was kind of like a proto-Nazi in some respects, so it's really difficult to sort of like figure out what aspects, what's what, you know, with those philosophers. But that's an interesting point. The idea of like bringing up Hegel or Fichte or any of these old philosophers. Everybody brings up Kant. You know, you can't do a big major paper without bringing up Kant at some point, even if it's a joke. You know what I mean? But the thing is that that's interesting that maybe it was in Deleuze. It was Deleuze, yeah. So the idea that you're gonna bring up these old philosophers and kind of not in a kind of like a holistic way, not the whole thing, you know, but you're going to sort of like say, well, I'm in favor of this idea or against that idea. So that's interesting, Stephen. Yeah, that's I mean, I've read a lot of Hegel. I read a little bit of Fichte, you know, and it's kind of like really.
Well, it seems to be that, you know, Kierkegaard kicked off his existential revolution, even though he didn't know it, in being contra Hegel. And there's something in Hegel
right.
that causes the mad fighting insect of existentialism to rise up. So that's all I can say.
the thing about Hegel is like he's almost like a contra theology. Hegel is such a he was like Heidegger in the 19th century. In other words, if you look at Heidegger as like a great body of philosophical work that was kind of difficult to that's difficult to confront, you know, because of its size and its heft, its hermeneutics, the fact that it relies on ancient philosophy, you know, and so forth. Hegel, just my main point though is that Hegel is very similar to that. Hegel, when they wrote down the students who were attending Hegel's philosophy, history of philosophy classes, when they got together and decided what they were going to publish, it was 3 volumes. They did like a 3-volume set of philosophy notes from Hegel's history of philosophy. And so it was like, you know, what is the history of philosophy for Hegel? Well, it's this kind of like, all the philosophers and everything you can possibly say about all of them. And that was the decision of the students when they got together and published Hegel's history of philosophy. Which,
the question with Hegel is Hegel on the question of chaos. Now, this is the thing. Nietzsche, I think, had a vision of chaos which was really stark, really powerful, and most philosophers aren't. They want to put the Christmas wrapping over chaos. They want to hide for it or pretend it's something else or it's not there. But Nietzsche's out with the beast and saying what a beast it is. And it's as though Hegel's saying, don't worry about chaos. It's not a problem. Whereas Nietzsche is saying, no, chaos is real. It's a real problem.
We can agree on that. And this is where Levinas and Deleuze are really different. Deleuze is bringing in the aspect of chaos from Nietzsche, and Levinas is completely in this kind of like mode of disguised theology, but but perhaps reasonably bringing up the second person relationship as a war of morals, or a moral conscience. The interesting, does anyone get this idea that it's only the same, the first person that is expected to have this conscience, reestablishment, essentially, reestablishment of the moral conscience. He hardly ever puts those words together, but I think at one point he does. The moral conscience, and then the second person, the face, is basically reacting to the lack thereof, and that therein lies the potentiality for destruction in the relationship.
Right. He says ethical resistance is the presence of infinity, is the exact phrase that he used. And so, yeah, it's resistance to your own morale, like you're saying, morale. You're an observer, you're deciphering, you're establishing good and bad. Well, he's saying there's a resistance to that in the non-self, in the difference, he also uses the word exterior a lot, right. And so so it's resistance to sameness, right?
Right, the same, right. So he kind of blames, in a sense, he's making Dasein a stickman. For me, he makes Dasein a stickman, saying it's responsible for the rejection of exteriority, the rejection of difference, the same. Everything has to join the same, which is Dasein. So he doesn't say that, but essentially that's the stickman he's sort of setting up as the same. The le mem, are and at the beginning he says the word ego. It is the ego, the self. But so that becomes the battle. In other words, so I don't know if I'm not ready to have that fight. But could this relate to the war between the sexes? In other words, just watching a show called The Morning Show on Apple Plus. I'm not making a plug, but my son made me watch it, and he has the subscription. And I'm watching The Morning Show, and it's all about this Me Too battle. And then there's a battle that erupts inside the show. I haven't finished watching it, so don't worry about spoilers. But there's a battle that erupts inside the show regarding that sort of secondary as a result of the Me Too battle, and how it affected the show. So sexuality, partnership, relationships, anyone?
I'm concerned. I'm very interested in Levinas, a conception of the other, but I still feel that the other as the other person is too focused. And it has this idea. To me, I don't know, but Heidegger's notion of Dasein, it seems to rest upon a conception of consciousness of what we are as something in our heads, kind of like a Descartesian, a Cartesian notion of what we are. Whereas there's another view of what we are. We are beings integrated and interacting with the world. If there was no world, if there was no other, it's not only a question of neurons and brain, it's also a question of the external world. So there's that, externality is extremely important. It's more than extremely important. It is, essential. And to me, making the other person the essential is too narrow a focus on what otherness could mean.
Well, if I can kind of offer a thought, in the lecture, the phrase transformative is used and reworlding. And if we go back to Heidegger was all about worlds. You move about in your world, and he discussed at length. But for the first time for me with Levinas, I am hearing someone offer a prescription for a transformative. We've talked about how we may be and how we engage with the world, but what will I do, or how will I engage in a becoming or a transformative project, if that's what I decide that's where I need to go. And Levinas is of the thought, as human beings, the most productive or the most informative element would be fellow humans. You're not going to have a transformative experience by looking into the face of a rock or looking into the face of a tree, because we are social creatures, and because it is the other that will facilitate. And Lucas, I read your thing here about authenticity, and that was a good comment. I think that's what prompted my comment, is that for me, I'm hearing, I've always been fascinated with the praxial, which is the concept of practice or action or engaging in projects or philosophies to facilitate action. And with Levinas, he's actually, like it or leave it, he's actually at least offering up one path to a transformative reworlding, reinventing of the self. And it will be in the face of the other, because we are social creatures, and the other is the most important entity in our being. And so he recognized that, and that's why I am fascinated. I'm wide open to criticisms because I made the mistake of accepting Wittgenstein, his original Tractatus, as the word, and I did what I could with it. And then I read an article that he disavowed, that, that he walked away from everything, and I had to go back and reread Philosophical Investigations, where he said, "Oh yeah, I said this and I said that," and really, and I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek here, but so I'm fascinated. For the first time, I actually hear, because help me here, but my understanding in Being and Time, he never really finished part 2, which was about the becoming. In part 1, or the first 2/3 of the book, was about being, was about existence and being. But my understanding, or at least what I read, I never found anything that I felt was productive in part 2 of Being and Time. And so I want, that's why I like Levinas. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah, I think the only thing thing I can say to defend Heidegger is that there is some kind of like reference, I think, in one of the early chapters to the fact that things could be this understanding that things at hand and things things present. Things that are present are basically versions of people in the world. And he talks about how we can have fairly nondescript relations with other people, and then we can have much more meaningful relations with other people. But he doesn't go into great detail. That's absolutely true. So.
And I'll step back. I've been dying to share. I read a review of Levinas from another French writer, and I don't recall a lot of it except for one little story he told that illustrates what Levinas was getting at. And you can engage in this little thought experiment yourself, and that is when you pull up to an intersection and there's a homeless person standing there asking for money. It is remember now, Levinas is more concerned with the vulnerable. He's not talking about people who are bigger and stronger and more aggressive than us. His path for transformation is in the face of those that are vulnerable. And that's where we will be ethically challenged to rise to the occasion. And so the example this French writer gave was, what's your attitude or what's your experience when you stop at an intersection and there is a vulnerable individual standing there asking for something from you. So anyway, I found that quite interesting.
Yeah, because it makes you think. I think that even myself. I mean, I'm kind of critical from the standpoint of the fact that it doesn't sort of close. I think it misses the main point about relationships. I think relationships are. I agree with Heidegger. Relationships are controlled by dialogue, and so I think by trying to close off the importance of dialogue, Levinas makes it all about the appearance, the fact that the person is a being, or makes an appearance, and then in other words, phenomenology. Oh, and somebody was saying, where is this philosophy before Levinas? Well, some of these ideas are in Husserl, who was Heidegger's teacher, the teacher of Heidegger, and also Karl, what's his face?
Karl, what's?
Yeah, but the other.
You're talking about Jaspers, maybe?
Jaspers, yeah, thank you, Jaspers, yeah, very good. So yeah, these ideas are not this kind of like reliance on not this particular metaphysics, but the heavy metaphysics and the dialectical investigation and so forth goes back to Husserl, and then although the heavy concentration on Descartes as the authority for philosophy, that's kind of a little bit in sync with Sartre. And in my humble opinion, this is just a little bit nationalistic, maybe. I don't know, but that's kind of just my humble opinion. Is the fact that we got both Sartre and we have so Levinas saying, "Let's go idealist." And by the way, we have this idealist philosopher with a French name, René. You know, we're gonna go back to René and do a little René stuff and claim. And for Sartre, it was reclaiming existentialism for the French, which is fine. You know, that was okay. And for Levinas, it's if you excuse me, it's the mem. It's the same thing. It's the same thing also. Just being a little bit relying on French philosophers, and Levinas studied. He was really big on Bergson. He was really big on he studied Bergson. He studied so he was definitely in the mode of a French philosophy student, not just somebody who went to Germany to study with Husserl and Heidegger. So anyway, so that's I'm trying to lay some bombs. I'm trying to drop a few landmines, but not landmines, but trying to drop a few hand grenades maybe. But I don't know if I'll be successful. Somebody asked for that, so that's as far as I could go. Is we have a custom with Levinas, we have a customized metaphysics, and we have very heavy reliance on phenomenology. We have the shutdown. We have ontology, but just a trace of ontology. We don't have the ontological method that was the basis of being in time. So, go ahead, Stephen.
Well, I was wondering, there's a question here in relation to Levinas. In that relationship to the other, is morality purely an act of politics? So I'm a behaviourist in outlook. I think we're just animal machines, basically, and all the supposed good that we try to make out we are, and the good we do, is there with mercenary motives. We feel that that's going to benefit our own existence somehow. So the case of Levinas, so is it the case when we relate to the other, is it moral, or is it really just all politics?
Anyone? I think politics comes in here. In the sixth section, in the last section, he talks about the basis of philosophy. Earlier on, he mentions that we can blame a lot of this disregard of the other, the injustice. We can blame a lot of this injustice on the history of philosophy. He's kind of a hint, right? But then he becomes more explicit at the very end. He says that it's everything since Hobbes. Since Hobbes, everything. Let me get the statement. I'm sorry.
Hobbes is my hero.
Yeah, we won't blame you for that. But it says, yeah, I got it open in my phone. Okay, I'm almost there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
yeah, here it is.
okay,
I just wanted to get that one quote. Since Hobbes, I know it's in the last paragraph. Okay. Moral exigency. Um, okay. Yeah. Go. Oh, here you are. The essence of philosophy. Yeah, I can't find the quote. Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Derek. What were you saying? I'll find it.
I mean, I was just going to add something to the theme for the moment. Is that, I mean, yeah, I mean, of course, philosophy is culturally, indebted to French culture, to Anglo-Saxon culture in England, in Australia, in the US. All these philosophies have a particular flavor. Hobbes. I'm not a great fan of Hobbes. I mean, isn't he just a bit just a bit crude? Isn't Hobbes a bit crude? He says things like justice is nonsense on stilts, or implies that the pursuit of man is for pleasure. I'll just leave it at that because I don't know a lot about Hobbes.
He's my boy.
What do you like about him, Stephen?
Oh, I just like his stark appreciation of reality. I mean, you can have your ideals, but they're just window dressing.
Right.
The world's a nice and calm and easy place.
Right.
Have our little tea parties and be all pleasant to each other. Watch out when the wind blows,
Right.
the flag turns around. This is always my story that, okay, in a crowd of 10, 100, whatever, you got one at one end, he's always going to be what we call bad. One at the other one end, there's always going to be what we call a saint. All those in the middle depends on which way the wind blows. And we've seen that in history. And I think even, it's like, when Yugoslavia fell apart, people said, oh, we're friendly neighbours for years, and then they're trying to shoot us. And this is this stark reality which we always like to paper over and hide. And this was something Nietzsche and people like him were pointing to. And Nietzsche's saying you do not have to succumb to this dark reality, but it is there. It's your choice. Don't go around with a strange fantasy in your head that it isn't there or something's always going to save you.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really great point. I think that he wasn't specifically targeting Hobbes. He was just basically saying, since Hobbes, we can say this is true. The quotation is modern political theories since Hobbes deduce the social order from the legitimacy, the incontestable right of freedom. And this is something we haven't been talking about. In Levinas, we have freedom contrasted to judgment. So freedom is the original sin in Levinas against Dasein, against the self, and the remedy to freedom, or the act by the other against the uncontested, immoral, unethical use of freedom by the same is judgment. So we have the contrast of freedom and judgment. He doesn't ever say that freedom in itself is bad, but that freedom simply becomes an exercise of the ego, and that outside of the envelope of morality. There's no prearranged envelope of morality in Heidegger. There's no prearranged envelope of morality in Nietzsche. So this idea that in other words, the ethical, for Nietzsche even says, that the ethical has to be arranged by yourself. You need to everyone will create.
Sounds like Levinas is looking for some sort of certainty.
Right, or a moral sense. He wants a moral exigency to come from shame. That the self will be judged. He'll develop a sense of shame, and then from this sense of shame, he'll understand the moral exigencies that need to limit his destructive behavior.
Cannibals feel shame, don't they?
Don't know. I haven't eaten with cannibals. That was a great comment, Stephen.
They might not have cooked you. They might not have cooked you right, and then they'd feel very, very ashamed of themselves.
But so do people have this kind of? Do people have this right to? If we don't have an ethic that's up to the level that they require, do they possess the right to make judgments? We all make judgments. So they possess the right to make judgments, and in making judgments, do we have an automatic reaction of shame? Will we have an automatic reaction of shame, like the Germans, for example? In other words, you're Jewish, she's German. Is she ashamed because you were Jewish and had a concentration camp experience or a Holocaust experience? In other words, is there this or worse, a Me Too movement? So there could be a Me Too movement, and we're confronted with judgment from the Me Too movement, and is it incumbent upon us to produce shame, self-produced shame, or is it incumbent on us to produce a result, a kind of like a new a result that resembles shame, or resembles a renewed moral commitment?
I would claim that all shame, in the end, is a reference back to yourself. That somehow you haven't lived up to your adopted standard. Now, for example, you could be running an extermination camp and be ashamed that you didn't kill enough people. Now, I've read accounts of people that were working in those systems, brutal Japanese guards, or perhaps not so brutal. And the thing is, there were plenty of people, most of them felt distressed by what they were seeing, but it was all in a good cause. Get the picture there,
right? But that's what Lucas was saying. I think that the new standard for authenticity is second person. So in other words, or I don't know if it was Hunter or Lucas, but the idea is that the standard in Levinas for authenticity. I didn't read that. We don't read that in this essay, I don't think. But the standard for authenticity is now first and second person, not first person.
Is it fair to ask the question with Descartes, or I'm looking for input here. With Descartes, there was a dualism, this subject-object paradigm that perhaps was put out, and Heidegger's project was to form a unity, was to put out or to explain, as part of his project of being, that there was a unity that occurred between the individual and his or her world. But then Levinas comes along and he fractures that, and we're back to the subject-object paradigm or encounter, because it certainly sounds like it's a project of subject-object. Am I saying that right?
I think you are. I think Levinas is not a child of Heidegger in a lot of his writing, although he brings up Heidegger, for explicit reference, explicit criticism, and it's kind of like for Levinas, I think there was the idea is that he couldn't really talk about these things without bringing back the guerrilla in the room? So that's and it was Lucas in his chat comment that talked about that was talking about a shift in the meaning of authenticity. That the authenticity, maybe not so much. I don't know if I completely agree with that, but the idea is that what happens, the action that is described by Levinas, the the
Encounter.
the ambiguity, the arbitrariness of the act by the ego, the kind of the face, the confrontation with the judgment of the other, and the resulting and the resulting conflict. He calls it a war in this document. So the resulting conflict has a potential for producing shame in the individual that is trying to produce that, who has an interest in reducing everything to the same. Now, by the way, does anyone kind of agree with me that might not be fair? I mean, it seems to me that the idea that the individual in Levinas wants everything reduced to the same. Is that a fair characterization? Can anyone defend that?
Expand on what do you mean by the same?
I hate to have to fish for the quote. I think it's in the first section. I think it's in the first section. Let me just search. Same. And the face who judges. Okay, the resistance the same. Oh, here it is. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think it's in the first section. Autonomy and heteronomy. So Levinas is interested in autonomy rather than authenticity. In other words, the even puts a dash in it. Autonomy. In other words, the self-naming, the self-dictating, as it were, of autonomy. And he doesn't use the term authenticity. He does, the quotation here is reducing to the same all that is opposed to it as other. So in other words, for Levinas in this expression, it's only opposition that creates a problem. The situation only occurs when there is opposition. So when you have
we make everybody like the color blue, and we'll be right.
Right. But we only do that when we sense opposition. So in other words, we might be red, and there's purple, and there's yellow, and we're kind of cool. We might even accept green, but then when the color blue comes around, we sense opposition. Maybe we had it last time, or we always have opposition from the color blue. And
what are you going to do with the professionally offended, though, who will go out of their way to create a drama with any color they come across?
Well, here's a kind of like a riff on it. I mean, the color blue could just be like outside the rainbow. So we tell the color blue, we say, we got the whole rainbow coming in here. Why can't you be like the rainbow? Why don't you be a rainbow guy for us? Because we want you to be the same. We want you to be, in the rainbow. Can you join the rainbow, or is there can we put blue in the rainbow, or can we because we can't deal with this opposition.
So this is sorry, James. want to stay focused. So what you're positing here, what you're suggesting is this is a discussion about his characterization of autonomy, and he's critical that the individuals who are because the project is not autonomy, it's heteronomy, right?
Right. He wants heteronomy.
So
and this is a way of obtaining heteronomy. In other words, his goal. He doesn't use the word heteronomy a lot in all sections, but his goal, I think, is achieving heteronomy, and autonomy is seen as
deficient, as Heidegger would say, a deficient mode.
Right. There you go.
Yeah, that's what Heidegger talked about. It is a deficient mode. When the hammer break, you would jump out of your current skillful coping and enter a deficient mode. But so what he's suggesting is that consider the fact that blue shows up is to use that in an informative sense. That okay, it may be you may sense an opposition, but recognize that opposition and allow it to afford an opportunity to have a transformative experience.
Exactly. No, I like it. I like it. So he's saying we have a duty to recognize the other. We have a duty to. It's almost like you would. We certainly have to deal with the other. If we believe in traditional justice, we're willing to victimize the other. So I think that's kind of like there is this kind of like double-sidedness to this philosophy, since we live in a society which does use justice as a tool for determining who is a free citizen, who is to have freedom, and then to actually describe this mechanism of alterity, when we know that alterity, by the nature of the society that we live in, is not necessarily equally free. So
am I hearing hints of Foucault and his work on the mentally ill and how the establishment would use the paradigm of mental illness as a tool of oppression?
Could be. I mean, I'm not really a Foucault expert, but I did read one of the books. It was
anyway.
Yeah. I don't know. I did hear that lecture though about the mentally ill. So I did watch a lecture on the mentally ill by Foucault. So I think that no, you're absolutely on the right path. But I'm just looking for criticism, a sound criticism of this path of Levinas. In other words, we easily fall in our judgmentalism on, which goes way back. Everybody knows about judgment. If we become the judge on the side of alterity, don't we sort of, how do we stem the risk? There's the question. How do we stem the risk of hypocrisy?
I think that's what Lucas hinted at when he said that authenticity is not my own. Authenticity is not for me to, as compared to Heidegger. Heidegger, if you're not going forward, engaged in your fate or what you were perhaps destined to be, that's inauthentic.
So that was a robot. Sorry about that. I can turn it off. These things have a switch, I discovered. Okay. So, yeah, it doesn't exactly answer my question. It says the authenticity doesn't belong to you. Does it belong to the other? Does it belong to the judgmental other? That's my question. Is like, how does it belong to anybody? In other words, authenticity. If authenticity doesn't belong to you, has it been reassigned? Is it part of society now? What's going on?
I mean, are we talking about authenticity as a kind of a judgment, a social judgment? I mean, and going back to the idea of shame, shame is a social, a phenomenon. That some people don't feel shame. We have today people who are shameless, perhaps bankers or Donald Trump, perhaps. We have shameless people, and they cannot be shamed. They have simply rejected those criteria of a judgment. And are we talking about the same thing with authenticity? I mean, personally, I feel that authenticity is, a subjective property, and although it can be influenced by culture, it's nevertheless it has a subjective core.
Yeah, and I think Levinas is what he's actually saying is that the subjective, the authentic self can be unjust. The authentic self plays a role in victimizing the other, and the remedy. So what Terry was saying is that I guess it was. I'm sorry. Lucas was saying is that it can be, and I guess he's posted something as an answer, but I'm sorry, I'm not that fast a reader. But the idea that if there's an alterity, if there's an alternate, there you go, an alternate authenticity. So if there is an alternate authenticity, and that's what we're talking about here. So there's an alternate authenticity. Authenticity is not a one-man band. It's shared. You have to have a guitarist and a bassist and and all that. So that the kind of if we're not going to have a one-man band, authenticity is shared, and the result is the authenticity does not. It's not like it's not a panacea. There we go. And everybody says that about Heidegger. Authenticity. That is one of the main kind of not rejections, but critiques of Heidegger. Is authenticity is not a panacea, right? It doesn't solve all problems, and that's basically the basis of what Levinas is saying. But my question is once you get over the individual, or having authenticity, being the only one in the room with authenticity, once you get over that sort of like idea, which very few people would have, I think, do you go right away to this inflicting of shame with on other based on your own judgment or shared judgment, if you will. You can say instead of the other we have les autres, the many, right? So you have the many. You're going back to Heidegger now. The they. Can the they, or some nicer word for it, actually come back and say, well, we have a judgment, and if you can produce your shame, then we can forestall a war. But can they say that? Can the individual say that without being at risk of being hypocritical? I don't think anyone's really answered that question yet.
I mean, I'm a bit confused. I mean, are you talking about using personal authenticity as a ethical criteria to impose on other people, which would not be, ethical?
Well, I think if that would be, if that's using Lucas's criteria, which was supported by Terry. Terry and Lucas said that authenticity is shared. It's always shared, and in this context. And even if the other isn't authentic, the action could be exactly the same, is what I'm saying. We don't know whether the other is authentic. We can only judge our own authenticity. As somebody who's been a Heideggerian, I think we judge our own authenticity. We take our own authenticity as valid. We don't judge the authenticity of others, but judgment exists. There's judgment out there. So if we're saying, if you are an alterity, if you are another, you need to get busy with your judging. How is that? I mean, it might be fair. I'm not saying it's unfair, but is it in that sense? Is it hypocritical? Because nobody was walking in the other's boots, although one side may have jack boots. So I'll confess to that. Not mine personally, but what if the other has jack boots, or the other is the what's his name? But the Hollywood producer that went to jail.
Yeah. I mean, we have to make judgments about other people, about the nature of the other person's values and authenticity, in order to understand them, in order to understand other people, in order to understand ourselves. So in that respect, I think it's an essential aspect of living our lives to make these judgments. Now, I mean, and then we have what significance should we attribute to these judgments that we make of other people?
I think you're right. I think there's nothing special about judgment. It's just that Levinas brings it up, and Levinas brings it up as the counter move to the murder move of the same. So the same, Hitler's guys, is one of which happens to be Heidegger. So the same want to impose victimhood on someone else, and you're it is, in a sense, the response to that. The best response is judgment, leading to war, and maybe he's making a good point, and that's what we have also to a certain extent in the Me Too movement. Although it can be argued that there's a lot of secondary effects that come out of that kind of confrontation. Not that the confrontation itself is unfair, or the confrontation is not necessary.
I just wanted to insert this, and then I have to go. But I have been perhaps disparaging, a little tongue-in-cheek, of some of the existentialist philosophers, that their works just didn't seem to really, with any substance, get into the morality and ethics. But I want to shout out for Camus, because when I'm sure almost everybody in the room has read The Stranger and The Fall, and my interpretation of those works, that it had definitely had ethical overtones and offered the opportunity for an individual to reflect on the ethical nature of others. So anyway, Camus, I think, was kind of an exception in the existentialist repertoire. So
So you think that Camus hit it a little bit more on the nail than Levinas?
No, no.
Hit the nail on the head better than
Prior to Levinas, ethics just didn't seem to really be something that the previous existentialist philosophers, and I think Heidegger said it, that he wasn't really interested in morality ethics. I could find it, but anyway, but my own interpretation of Camus is that he did put on the table ethical questions in our interaction with others in those works, the plague, and he really, it was almost about the other, indirectly.
Yeah. Okay, so Camus and Levinas, very similar. Thanks for your contribution tonight, Terry. By the way, that was great.
Well, I'm a novice. I'm groping here, and I hope you feel free to step in and straighten me out any time. But anyway,
you're fine. You're really. I think your reading of Levinas is definitely. Well, it's much more positive than mine. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, but very quickly, just in all the work I've done, for the first time, I'm hearing from someone that is at least sort of loosely connected to the existentialist lineup. It's the first one that has really seriously, in some way, talked about the other.
Mm-hmm.
And we are social creatures. And yeah, you've raised some great questions, and I'm going to have to reflect on them. But at least he's put it, and he called it, I'm reading here, he actually referred to it as ethics as a first philosophy. Those are his words. So his project was he recognized, just like Heidegger with his project on being, I think Levinas felt that there need to be more discussion about ethics.
Right. So in that sense, he's going against that idea of Nietzsche that ethics are basically a custom job. Without Christianity, ethics becomes a customization project.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And then Levinas is, in your estimation, is actually pointing in a positive direction for a unified moral,
Well, at least putting it back on the table to be discussed.
Yeah.
Instead of this egotistical, narcissistic,
Ouch! Ouch!
Well, I'm an existentialist. I love them. But hey, that's Matt's words. Listen to the lecture.
Not again.
Anyway, thank you all. I got to go, but loved it. Thank you all for your tolerance.
Thank you, Terry. You're wonderful. I mean, wonderful in the sense that you're a philosopher.
Yeah. That's my family has a different opinion on that. Good night.
Good night.
I mean, I'd just like to say that I think that existentialists and others have got very good reasons for moving away from the ethical understanding of mankind. But in Levinas' case, I think he's aware of those problems and putting a whole different a complexion on what ethics is, because we need to re-engage with this aspect of life, but not in the constructive, in the way that ethics is constructed in the normal way of moralizing or making up rules or imposing what we have to do from the outside in a Kantian sense.
Okay.
And to go back to like your point on hypocrisy, like I think what he's trying to say is that he's embracing the immediate potential of hypocrisy by challenging the other, right? And he says, can you shamelessly judge yourself? So you almost need this other being, this other thing, this other idea to then evaluate yourself and evaluate hypocrisy and establish, a sense of ethics that's autonomous, but then can be translated to a heteronymous state, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
it's out of body evaluation of one's own ethics and challenging the idea of one actually having established ethics, versus versus just going with the social contract that is, societal ethics, right? And so
Right.
he's it's interesting because he's against duality, and then he's not, like, he's viewing duality as necessary, but then trying to find a different end game, right? Like, he's seeing the face as the enemy of combat, in war, or whatever you want to call it, but also, like, open to this Heideggerian dialogue that you speak of, but it's he's like towing the line between two different worlds. It's very intriguing, which is,
Yeah.
he's bridging existentialism and postmodernism and all these different ideas together, right?
Right.
And so he's very contradictory, but in a shameless way. Like, he's a conundrum. Like, it's really strange.
It's difficult to read. He's difficult to read, but I think you just opened something up for me. Is that he's not making an attack on authenticity. He specifically changes the wording to autonomy, and he's specifically talking about an individual, a specific type of individual that wants to reduce others that are in conflict to the same. So in other words, and this could be called in American terms, I think we call this the authoritarian individual. I've read some political books that try to single out the problem with Republicans is that many of them are authoritarians. They're not just conservative; they're authoritarian.
Right. It's the four ways. There's authoritarian liberal, authoritarian libertarian, and then you have the authoritarian conservative. So you have the authoritarian versus libertarian, and you have conservative versus liberal. So you have this quadrant.
Right. Right, and I would say that I used to be when I learned about that, I was kind of like afraid of them and everything. We got Stalin, Hitler, terrible people, over here. But and you'd meet them in bars sometime. You could actually meet them in bars, right? So or any place, I guess, at school, whatever. Yeah. So or you could work for them. I had a boss that was like that. Yeah, he wasn't like an American authoritarian. He happened to be Romanian. He was from Romania. But I like foreigners. Trust me. Anyway, this idea that people that are on the authoritarian side is probably, in other words, authenticity may not be that bad. But if you get authenticity and then preach a authoritarian philosophy, or you mix it with an authoritarianism, or the wrong kind of politics. He's even saying that at the very end. He's saying it's this wrong kind of political philosophy that we've had, controlling the dialogue for a long time, that creates the danger in the freedom of the individual, and that's where I'm kind of like that's what sets my hair on fire, right? This going after the freedom of the individual as the cause of the arbitrariness of the authoritarian inherent in the authoritarian personality, the reduction of others to the same. And so that could be another reading that we need to do of Levinas, is that he's not talking about all authentic people. He's not talking about all individuals or individualistic people. He's talking about the reduction of others in the presence of conflict
And judgment, right? Yeah.
to the same.
Yeah,
Well,
to the same.
the judgment is a secondary effect for Levinas.
Right, of course, yeah.
It's
But,
that the face responds to murder with, you know, or its equivalent with judgment. Yeah. So, does anyone have anything on further on any further comments on Levinas, or anyone want to talk about Deleuze any further? Since we burn up so much time on Levinas, and I almost know nothing of Deleuze. I read it's basically a review of a book review in the that was assigned, and listen to that. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I'm in the same boat. I mean, I know very little about Deleuze. I just remember seeing something about Deleuze saying something about not being other people, that other people not, you know, are not being there. I mean, does that ring a bell with anybody? And this sort of chimes in with my criticism, perhaps, of Levinas as yeah, I mean, other people are a crucial way into our own, you know, existence, if we can use that phrase. But nevertheless, I think they are a contingent fact of our, you know, existence. And perhaps,
Yeah.
you know, Deleuze is saying, oh, well, you know, do other people really have to be there?
Well, no, I think. Well, he calls them the ex-other. He calls them the ex-other. And I think you're probably right, Derek. There is this thing in Deleuze that they are the optional ex-other, and it seems like in COVID, it's a little bit like that. You know, like, you know, I talk to people and I text people and stuff, but I don't have a lot of live relationships going on. So there is that kind of like loss of sociability that's possible in human existence. I'm not sure if that was true of Deleuze or not. I think he was a married guy, and there's pictures of him having a get together with, you know, multiple people. So you have something to say about that Hunter?
I mean, I myself am new to Deleuze. I, you know, just in the past week, but one of his big things is this question of what is philosophy, right? And he's going against the norms of all philosophy before him, saying philosophy has always been about discovery, as if there is a truth to be discovered, where he's turning that on its head and saying, no, philosophy is about creation, and about this content creation that comes from what he calls unbound points, which is basically the ultimate non-other, right? Like it's saying that it's anti-pedagogical, right? It's saying that like how do we form new ideas or new concepts without the basis or the foundation of anything else before, because you're tainting the act of creation through the act of discovery of the past or discovery of the truth or whatever you want to. So everybody before him saying, oh, there's something to be found, right? And he's saying, no, there's nothing to be found. There's only what we create. Like philosophy is an art of creation, right? And right, so
Yeah.
it's very it's very new. Like it's very, you know, anti-pedagogical. Going
It's
against
fresh.
yeah right yeah.
So this is in fact, I think, a very postmodernist theme that you know, that seems to come in with Deleuze, as far as I can see, that there is no overarching truth or system about things, that we in some sense finding out the best way we can in a pragmatic way and making a lot of things up.
Yeah, there's just differences. There's just differences. We can cite differences. We can find differences, cite differences, and that'll lead us to having a richer metaphysical relationship with a all too complicated and rich reality.
Right. Well, and it's liberating. It's not the duality; it's the multiplicity. Right. There is no self and other. There's all these different options.
Well,
Right.
he calls it in this essay. He calls it the X other.
Yeah.
So
Right.
and Matt said that it's the X other. In other words, we don't know what it is. We just know that it's different, and that it's embracing all the differences. We're creating a better relationship with reality for ourselves than in this search for truth.
Mm-hmm.
Postmodernists are also post-structuralists, and in them there is this strong theme of a difference. And Levinas, not Deleuze, he uses schizophrenia and this notion of difference very strongly as a part of philosophy. I mean, I'd just like to add that I wonder if we can get away from structures. It's not that a difference and contrast a structure that we cannot escape from. That's a beginning of a critique of a postmodern view.
I'm not going to touch that with 10-foot polygon. Lucas, do you have anything? Anything you spontaneously want to verbalize about this? I know your comments are always interesting.
No, thank you. Sorry, I got distracted for a while, and I'm not really sure where the conversation is at the moment.
Oh, you're reading a book or something?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Sure.
Thanks anyway.
All right. So, well, that was great. That's a great insight on Deleuze. Thank you, Hunter. Anyone else?
Welcome. I mean, it's very intriguing to me, and it's very apropos. It's almost as if, what Deleuze is saying has manifested in society without people being cognizant of his philosophy, right?
They're blaming the Matrix movies on him, right?
Well, and I was just gonna say, yeah, Baudrillard. It's.
Oh, it's Baudrillard. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Baudrillard. Yeah, it's. You and I walk down the same. You and I walk together down the street, and it's a different street, right? Mm-hmm. It's people's assumption or people's assuming of a personality through constructs, through stimuli and simulation, are now creating this non-dual experiential state of a hive mind, right? I mean, it's really individualistic while also being really what's it called? Social biased, right? I mean, it's you're getting a lot of people that say, that are embracing the other in a dogmatic way, which is then reestablishing it as a self and other. So you get this weird, hypocrisy, not in the sense of like pejoratively, but you get this weird hypocrisy of multiplicitous states of society all at the same time that's expounded by the internet and etc. It's like that. I think that's part of the reason why this is kind of happening now, is because you can live in an echo chamber and construct your own reality, right? And that's the danger, but that's what's happening, right? It's really, really interesting how these things have manifested.
Wow. So do you think we should do a series on on postmodernism?
I'm all for postmodernism. Yeah,
I
absolutely. I think that's just the natural next step too, instead of going backwards.
Yeah, we don't backwards
not
to
in a pejorative way. That is not like that's not a dig, but that's just where we're going. You know?
German
Because
idealism.
I don't even know it. Yeah.
Derek knows Kant, right? German idealism is a lot to bite off. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, well, whatever's fun.
So how do people fly with Deleuze on the question of you know, the individual alone in nature, when they discover that we discover then wickedness that is no longer that of man.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
This is more powerful than it looks, because, you know, in the history of Australia, there was this big issue about Lindy Chamberlain and her baby being taken by a dingo. The whole thing was, sorry?
I saw the piece on that. That was horrible. Yeah.
Well, the thing was, I'm a bit of a weirdo on that, but, you know, I was around at the time, and I just couldn't figure it out that when, to me, it wasn't a problem for me to accept that idea, because I was always taught that wild animals are wild animals. They're not human. This is something that comes up in Deleuze all the time, that this tendency to anthropomorphize nature, the worlds, that's just our little human bubble, that beyond that human bubble is the stark force of nature, which we've insulated ourselves from. And I just remember, the comments that we're getting from people, you know, say, "Oh, do you think she did it? Oh, you know, she's probably feeling a bit bad." And I was just thinking,
let me explain that for a second for anybody who doesn't know.
Okay, go ahead.
This Wendy person, she was the mother of a Lindy. Lindy was the mother of an infant child. When she went to check on her child in the tent, you know, it was a big campfire scene, you know, and their tent was a few rows back from where the campfire was. So when and everybody was there at the campfire that night, and when she went back to check on her child, the door of the tent was open, and the baby was missing. And then she was the news media made a case that she was guilty of killing her own child and then covering it up by making it look like the baby was stolen by a wild dingo, which is a type of dog in Australia, and and that she simply had made it up, killing her own child. And there were actually it was actually a case brought against her. It's like nobody could believe that a dingo, kind of like a national symbol of Australia, such a horrible thing as drag a human baby out of its cradle and consume it.
Yeah,
so
they were just tripping on it. Yeah, they just kept on tripping on it. And look, on the face of it, I accepted that. To me, it wasn't a problem. But, you know, suddenly all these people are talking. It was like all neighbours gossip, like, "Oh, yeah, do you think she did it? Oh, you know, she might have been feeling a bit bad." Like, this is all stuff that was just out there, theory-wise, and like, so yeah, I'd been taught wild animal is wild animal. You cannot trust them. But this had gone past. I think this was also an era when we now have, you know, after our enlightened environmentalism, where we've got alligators living beside humans much more often, and the wild dogs getting a bit out of hand. Now, this is a thing. I was born at the entrail of an era when people went out with their 22 rifles, and if they saw a dingo, they shot at it. And today we'd think, oh, that's really wicked, man. But back then, that was normal behaviour. Meaning, any dingo there was figured out humans bad, keep 1,000,000 miles away. And, you know, we'd almost wiped out the crocodiles and they started coming back. You know, it was the old 19th century story of children being taken by wolves and stuff like that. Back in the 1970s, the wildlife had been so shot away in a lot of places that people just didn't really see much of real wildlife anymore. Now it's coming back. Now we've had cases where people have been openly attacked by dingoes, stuff like that. You know, a 9-year-old kid is attacked by dingoes, gets its face torn off, and people are going, oh, nature is dangerous.
Yeah,
This is back in
because of climate change, we have a lot more animals to deal with. So,
and well, this is the thing that he's picked up on something that we might walk past, and then we have this sterling example staring us in the face that we have this tendency, like we control nature, and we do
Right.
it to an extent.
Yeah.
We do a little bit more than caveman did. We've got a little bit, but nature's still the big animal. It's the big Monty Python foot that's going to come down and squash it when it wants to do it. And the man will say, hey, nature, you can't do that. That's wrong. Nature has no morals or no conscience. They can't, they humanize or anthropomorphize. How do you say it again?
Anthropomorphize, yeah.
Anthropomorphize.
Anthropomorphize. There's an extra syllable. Yeah, thank you.
Anthropomorphize.
Yeah. There, yeah.
I mean, social structures have always been very strong in human thought, but in the past they've had different foundations, religion or nature. And I think moving into the postmodern age, we've lost those foundations. And I think, to my view, there's an overemphasis now from a philosophical world on those social structures. That all there is, it seems, in the postmodern view are social structures. I would push against this. I mean, I would like to go back to, there are genetic structures, but I think this is too insubstantial a basis. I mean, for me, I like structures of a consciousness. I mean, I don't want to be playing an old saw, but I mean, I think there are structures, and when Deleuze talks about schizophrenia and difference, I think this is indicative of a structure of consciousness that cannot be expunged by social structures. I don't know whether that is useful at all or not.
I guess so.
I think
it's hard to say. What would you say? Does the social structures basically how does Deleuze relate to social structures in contrast to the natural world?
I mean, I don't know, because I haven't read Deleuze, but I've just seen snippets of it. But I'm thinking about postmodernism in general as not accepting social structures from any source, whether it's from a religion or nature or genetics. But I think they've thrown the baby out with the bathwater here. And with their postmodernists, to me, it seems have got physicalist inclinations about understanding mind. And I think there are things about mind, in my view, not neurologically based things, but structurally based things that inform and guide our lives.
Okay, I wanted to get input from Hunter on that issue of social structures versus Deleuze's general view about of reality.
I don't know about his what he would think. I don't know yet about what he would think about social construction. But if it's anything like his idea of unbound points, basically the argument is that I can't remember if he uses this directly or not, but it's talking about like a scientific method, right? And it's basically saying that if we are holding on to established norms, to whatever it may be, whether it's hypermaterial view, of being, or of will, or whatever you want to call it, like as if we're only looking at things through the pedagogy of ideas and thoughts, then we're trapped, right? Then we are not liberating the potential of what our worlds can be. And in that sense, Einstein would have been burnt at the stake like Bruno, quantum physics wouldn't exist if we weren't open to new ideas, right? And so it's essentially, to me, the postmodernist thought, maybe in general, or a delusion thought, is about saying, is about proposals. And I do agree that people definitely take this sort of tabula rasa too far without paying respects to certain traditions, but also tradition can get in the way of innovation. And so that's kind of this argument, is that yes, there are these established norms that can make sense and do make sense most of the time, but how are we ever going to have the freedom to escape those norms without hypothesizing new ideas that are totally anti-pedagogical to philosophy, to any subject, intersubject here? Like, how are we ever going to move to a greater thought beyond humanity? Maybe it's to, the anthropomorphization of animals. It's like, okay, we probe that, and then we say, okay, is this too far? Well, I mean, this is just my view. It's like we probe it and we say, hey, there are no established norms. And then it's like, all right, well, let's throw in a norm and let's throw in what we think, and like, let's use the scientific, and so I think that's kind of what he's getting at, is he's emancipating the potential of new ideas.
Right.
I
And,
mean, I think
the
we
social,
need
just quick, Derek, I think the social structures are actually they actually result in limiting our thought. In other words, we don't know how we can possibly reform the criminal justice system.
Right.
Because the criminal justice system is too ensconced in society. It's too, there's a mythology of the human condition that leads us to believe that criminal justice cannot be anything other than what it is. That it's it's an established way of putting humans that we judge to have evil traits in away from the other humans, without really thinking, without having the ability to think the issues through from beginning to end. And there should be people who just think about those things 24/7, or not 24/7, but 8 hours a day, and just like we have these defense these defense what do they call them, think tanks. So we should have criminal justice think tanks that are actually reinventing criminal justice behind the scenes. But money is the only thing that seems to control anything. If there's money,
Right.
then there actually is social change, and if there's not money, then social change doesn't happen, and our minds are kind of like recreated in the image of reality, the reality that is that is the system. Whatever the system is, it becomes the mental image of our reality. So I think there is a need for postmodern thinking.
Yeah.
Are you still convinced there's no need, Derek?
No, there is a need, and it's vitally, important. But what we're looking for is a balance. I mean, I know people who don't believe in COVID or the moon landing, or there are super, intelligent beings, living at the center of the earth. I mean, postmodernism, it seems to run aground quite often on scientific fact, and what we need to do is, how do we find a balance between creative thought and normative thought, I think.
Okay. Let me see. I don't see David's rectangle. There he is. He's there. Anybody else want to comment? Go ahead. I think it's a good point to take us out on. We have a basic knowledge now of postmodernism and Deleuze, and we had a debate on Levinas, and it was great.
Well, one more Deleuze week, and then we're done. And
That was
of the existentialism class. So I guess I think everybody wants to go continue with the postmodernism, and I'm okay with that. That's fine.
I'm scared to death.
I could put the first week on for next week, and we could do Deleuze and the first. I believe he starts off with Derrida is first.
Isn't it? Isn't
He would
there?
be the first structuralist.
But isn't there another document? He said there's another document for Deleuze.
For Deleuze, no, we're just reading the one that we read.
Okay.
Was Michel Tournier and The World Without Others.
Actually, could I just bring up a little bit of subject matter that's connected with this? I often cross swords with the humanists, as James Cook might be slightly aware. And, I was at a humanist session, and they were discussing Lord of the Flies, and the whole concept of Lord of the Flies, which is something we're sort of dealing with here, just flies right in the face of humanism. I've always argued that humanism has this idea that there's something intrinsically good in human nature, which, all things being even, will emerge. And I just found it quite amusing. They rejected the whole idea, and then they're bringing up this case where some school children were somehow caught on an island. It wasn't quite as graphic as Lord of the Flies, but instead they were doing what Deleuze was saying won't happen. They'd gone like Robinson Crusoe in the book, not Selkirk, but Robinson Crusoe in the book, where he virtually recreates the English upper class on the island. With his manservant, the wild nature that he's tamed. And of course, in the real case, the real Selkirk, although he was quite an accomplished and intelligent man, a few years by himself, he would sort of lost it. It was still there, but he was running around like a mad goose. He was literally more like Mad Ben from Treasure Island than anything else. And this is the case that Deleuze is making, that when we lose the other, this is pretty much where we're going to go. Our whole nature, our whole series of reference points is going to fall apart. But I was quite amused. Well, here are the humanists again. They're saying the humanists, have this sort of moralistic interpretation of human nature. And I've always doubted it, because I believe although rationality will work for us most of the time, there's just these chaotic abysses out there somewhere on the horizon, and if we hit them, all our supposed goods are not going to save us. We're just going to go straight down into the darkness. Most of the time it'll work out. Most of the time the rationality will win, but there's just this chance. I say chance out there. Everyone's working on the principle, I'll say my prayers, I do all the moral things, and yet I will be amongst the saved. God is going to save me. It's something I encounter in religious thinker like anthroposophists, or what followers of Rudolf Steiner, have their vision of Jesus. And I'm saying, well, yeah, maybe there is a Jesus, but what if Jesus is not all powerful? And they recoil in horror. It's sort of like, you go up to heaven one day and you discover that Satan has won. Maybe your good God is not all powerful, but the world recoils at horror from this. You sort of get my point. But that's where I go with Nietzsche's vision that we're all good little people and everything, and most of the time, everything being equal, that's going to work. But out there's hidden little bits of chaos that might grab us.
I mean, I just have to mention the case against that. That's the best case I've ever read. The author has slipped my mind. The Better Angels of El Nature. Who was the author of that?
Even Pinker.
Yes, Stephen Pinker. I mean, he's a writer, really, but it's a really very well, research work. I think.
Yeah, it's really good at
nature, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's basically arguing that humans have gotten better over time and less non-ethical, like more moral. I mean, we've just, you can look at any subject, and while evil still exists, or however you want to put it succinctly, we are less evil than we've ever been. Like, if that maybe is most succinctly what we're saying.
Americans are less evil than they were in the 1950s.
Yeah, I think I'm developing a political opinion here, and people are going to hate me probably. Go to sleep hating me. We have progress, but that doesn't mean that progressives create it
Yeah,
exclusively.
exactly.
Yeah.
So where did things start going wrong, James? You're once a happy little humanist, and then you started to notice that it didn't quite add up as perfectly.
Oh, I always felt like a foreigner. I was always an existentialist among the humanists, but I noticed it. I noticed it when people started talking about absolute truth, right? So it's like that kind of like why would you come to a faulty epistemological assumption just based on the fact that you believe that humans contribute to a better world for humans, So it just doesn't seem to me that those two ideas have to go together in any way. So and these were the scientism guys, the guys that believe that science is going to cure the earth,
not my bit where I'm saying that, the mad scientist is literally the story of Dr. Faustus. Dr. Faustus giving everything he wants, giving the services of the magic imp, Mephistopheles. He doesn't really do anything great with it, and when his time up, he goes to hell. And this seems to be modern man with his technology. You got a great tool here. It's also something you can really.
Well, anyway, I'm just saying that there's a kind of like there's political philosophies that just don't work very well in the real world, and that's all. I'm just saying in the humanists, it's a big collection of people, and you're likely to run into someone who's very religious, or you might run into someone who's extremely nice. And you meet really nice people, and you meet people that are kind of like into scientism and so forth. The more intellectual ones will tend to be over on that side, trying to solve all philosophical problems. Inside humanism. Humanism is just a kind of like a one-stop philosophy for people that want progressivism and better education and stuff like that. But I've come to the conclusion that you're just as likely to get progress from a conservative as you are to get it from a progressive. It's just basically a question of what the society is going through at the time. If society is going through something that needs a lot of revision, then maybe progressives are kind of the right answer. But conservatives, even though they have the wrong answer, even though they want to keep old systems in place and not change, maybe the old systems and no changing results in a better society in the future. So it's not God doesn't ordain any particular political philosophy.
Right. Well, this is the assumption that the status quo is. It's either the status quo is correct or the status quo is incorrect. Right.
Right.
Whether it's progressives and Marxism, it's the shiny object that they haven't experienced before, at least in America, because they live in a capitalist society. It's, and then you throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, oh, capitalism is bad. And it's like, well, like that's not true. And then, but if we were in a socialist society, that's all socialism is bad. Well, it's like, oh, that's not true either. And so it's really easy to to just say, hell with it, let's just burn it all down. You know? But it's more complicated.
You're preaching to the choir, hell.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Hey, that's just, man, that's America.
I think capitalism
entertainment
is
at
a
its finest,
pejorative term. I'd rather hear the term free enterprise.
Well, we only heard about freedom from Levinas, so let's not get into it again. Let's call it over for the night, okay, David?
Full circle. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
So what have we got on next week?
It's the ending conclusion of Deleuze, and I might throw on the beginning of the postmodernism class, perhaps.
Okay.
But I was going to kind of recommend against not having too much double readings, kind of thing, so that. But that's just my kind of opinion. Yeah.
Okay. I'll keep it in moderation. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
All right. So next week we'll conclude with Deleuze, everyone.
Okay. Thank you very much, then. Catch you
Bye,
later.
everyone.
Thanks, David. Thanks, everyone.
Good night and good day, everyone.